All right, looks like we're live here. Let's see. All right, welcome everybody. Welcome to this Monday episode of Crypto with Chris. Today's going to be a bit of a shorter episode. Fundamentally, not much has changed from Friday, but we're definitely down to start the week. So I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit and see what that looks like. I also wanted to touch on a really cool new liquidity indicator that I've discovered over the weekend that I've been playing with, and I found it to be very insightful, and will be using it on many of my especially bigger charts like Bitcoin and stock indexes and things like that. So I want to go over that. But before that, I wanted to just say be sure to follow my Twitch channel so that you can be alerted of new episodes, and also so that you can participate in the chat. And please do chat me up. Ultimately, I really want this to be more of an interactive event for everybody. So, like, if there's any charts or indicators you want me to pull up or anything like that, just holler at me in the chat, and we can kind of dig into this. And it would be cool to be more of like a two-way conversation. Also, follow me on my Telegram channel for any announcements on all upcoming shows that I'm going to be on, whether it's going to be on Twitch here or as a guest on other shows. That's going to be my primary sort of hub for all of my announcements going forward. And the link for that is going to be in my Twitch profile and also in the description for all of my shows. Also, all of these streams are subsequently uploaded to YouTube. So I know Twitch doesn't keep them stored for very long. I think even in the beginning, it's only like 7 days. So if you missed any of my earlier shows, all of my stuff is all on YouTube. So everything's going to be on there going forward. So you'll be able to see it there. Outside of that, all right, let's get rolling. So let's start with this indicator first. So I kind of starting with a bit of a blank slate because I want to show you how to get it dialed in. So first, if you'll have your chart here, go to indicators and start typing Global Net Liquidity, and here we go. It's this one by Dharmatech, I think. So Global Net Liquidity, that's what you want. And when you first load it, it's going to load it down here under a separate pane down at the bottom like that. And if you've got a number of other separate pane indicators, like a lot of these momentum indicators and stuff load in lower panes like this, it doesn't, at the first, it doesn't look like it does much. But what you do, first you need to bump it all the way up to the top. So keep clicking the little up arrow each time it moves up. And we're going to move it all the way up to the very top. Now, once it's up to the very top, you're going to right click on the line itself. So like don't right click anywhere in the space of this indicator. You have to right click on the actual line. I figured that out the hard way. Once you're on the line, you'll see the dots come up. Go over here and move to and say existing pane above. Now it'll move it up into your actual chart that you're looking at, and that's what you want to see. And then I'm going to double click here to get rid of these other panes. Also, you want to make sure that the scales are the same on both sides. So you want to make sure automatic and logarithmic are both enabled on both sides, automatic, logarithmic. Okay, now we've got both so that it'll auto scale as you scroll. So now what we're looking at here, if you zoom out, we can see, so what this line here represents basically global net liquidity of like the 5 biggest global central banks. And as we can see here, it certainly, at least for the last while, or actually, let me turn off these Bollinger Bands for a second because that makes the scale wonky. So like if we kind of zoom out, I mean, basically it's followed Bitcoin pretty much to a T. Yes, it didn't follow it exactly when Bitcoin sort of blew up here, but that doesn't, I mean, from a proportional standpoint, it was still sort of moving in the same general direction as Bitcoin. Bitcoin just kind of happened to blow up. And then pretty much the world changed. March 2020, COVID hit. You can see this is when all the central banks just started flooding the system with cash, basically, printing money, basically. And that's what happened here. Here was the big March COVID Black Swan event, and just immediately after that, just boom, it took off. Liquidity took off, and we probably could have had I sort of been paying attention to this at the time. We could have observed that the price of Bitcoin and everything else was going to skyrocket basically shortly after, and essentially it did. So if any of you are fans of Raoul Pal, which I imagine many of you are, because I certainly am, and I'm a Real Vision member, he talks about global liquidity a lot and how it's basically going to be what drives everything, in terms of all of the markets going forward. And so this is a perfect example of that. And we can see, even in the bear market, all of 2022, liquidity was just tanking, and interesting as we zoom in here and get closer to where we are now, we can see, yeah, I mean, liquidity picked back up right at the beginning of the year. It actually started a bit earlier, and we could have known that, likely the bottom was in roughly around this time, which it was. I mean, we had the FTX crash that really kind of tanked stuff, but outside of that, the banks were already starting to kind of get back in the swing of things and put money back into the system, and that's what sort of fueled this big initial pump. Into the from the beginning of the year into like through the first quarter, basically. Um, but as we can see, liquidity has since leveled off and is going back down, and that sort of supported this kind of correction that we had back down to this longer trend line. And then we got a pump again, which kind of, I think fueled what's going on here and has supported this slightly sideways action we can see. But at this point, um, clearly things have leveled off. Liquidity it actually was on the move up a little bit earlier today, but it's kind of leveled off too. And this kind of goes back to my sort of thesis that I have right now that I think we're going to see kind of some just very kind of meh, price action up until the time frame of this potential first ETF approval. I'm going to go ahead and hide this liquidity indicator for the moment because I'm going to be messing with the scales. But yeah, I kind of wanted to dig into Bitcoin here first a little bit. Yes, we're down on the week. I'm not terribly surprised because again, nothing is really there's no narrative right now. We're in limbo, and I know I talked last week on Friday. Structurally, this is still fine, and really, I mean, it is. If we look at this, we're still barely coming down to the 10-week moving average. There's honestly nothing wrong with that, and really, it's likely that the 20-week moving average is below that, and really, this just constitutes a mean reversion on the weekly time frame, and that's totally healthy. That's totally normal. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. The sky isn't falling. Structurally, it's still in an uptrend even. I mean, yet, we set a higher high here. I think we could even come down even a little bit more. But what do we got here? This 28.5, give or take, is where the 20-week moving average is. And I think that's a nice, healthy settling point. We kind of so far are trading below this initial weekly support level that I had drawn last Friday, and that's fine. And this could even just turn out to be a wick below it. It's only Monday, so anything can happen. And again, I'm just not worried about this. And I just want to stress that to people, like, don't. Yes, we've had what looks like, what is it, one, two, three, four, six, down weeks in a row, and certainly this week that we're on now doesn't look good. And yes, we've got this 5 spot divergence flag on the weekly to kind of support this downward narrative. But again, if you kind of ignore all that and take a step back and zoom out, um, the three key elements of an uptrend for me are that it's bouncing off of either the 10 week or the 20 week, and the top of the Bollinger Bands, and prices in between both of those, and that's still the case. So you know everything's fine for now. We're also at this trend line that has kind of been in play since the beginning of the year. So we'll see how that holds. Again, I don't know if that's going to hold. I don't really care if it does one way or the other. I sort of just draw them as more of like an observation than I do a prediction or anything like that. Sometimes they hold and it's kind of interesting to see. Other times, they don't, and they're garbage. But obviously, for me, horizontal levels are way more relevant than diagonal trend lines. But nevertheless, it's sometimes fun and interesting. Let's take a look at ETH. I think ETH actually looks a little bit less healthy, if I'm not mistaken. We'll come back to Bitcoin in a minute on the daily time frame, but yeah. So on the weekly, ETH is actually even a little worse off. It's actually below the 10 and the 20-week moving average. So kind of to be expected. I guess if we kind of go back to the Bitcoin ETH chart and look at it's still sort of hovering along the bottom of this channel on the weekly time frame. So yeah, ETH just doesn't have the same strength right now in general. But let's look at Bitcoin on the daily here. Um, let's see what we got. So yeah, clean touch on the trend line. Um, on the daily, certainly it looks worse. Let's look at a couple of the others. On the daily, it certainly looks worse. It's technically a trend reversal to the downside on the daily. I mean, it started out above it and it was crushing it, and especially we had this pump up out of here, and I thought maybe it was going to keep going, but since then, you do have the three sort of signature elements of a trend reversal. The 10 has ever so slightly flipped below the 20. Price has slipped below both, and now it's kind of trading along the bottom of the Bollinger Bands here. So on the daily, you've got a trend reversal. Doesn't necessarily mean anything. You can have daily trend reversals on the daily and uh, have it just be a wick on the weekly. So yeah, it looks ugly. It's going down literally as I'm speaking here. But another interesting thing, this guy down here, this oscillator that I like, it did kind of flip over, which is interesting. It tried to do it earlier and sort of got rejected. Normally, this doesn't do this. I mean, if you kind of go back and look, you can see it's not common for it to kind of have this and then dip down a little bit more and sort of ride it sideways for a bit. Usually, it's just a clean break and a clean shot back up, but um, not this time. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how this plays out. Whatever. Yeah, ultimately, I'm not worried about it too much. Let's see what this liquidity indicator, oops, looks like on the daily. So it's funny. Earlier today, this indicator was actually flipped up ever so slightly, but then this candle got uglier and uglier, and now this is down. Um, I mean, ultimately, we know liquidity is going to be what is the leading indicator here, and it's going to be what is driving price. Um, but yeah, it's funny in terms of how it plays out in real time. I don't know. We'll see. Again, I don't really care, especially on the daily. I'm not worried about it, but it just is interesting to see this move like it does. One thing I did wanted to point out, though, super cool, is just on my watch list here. Everything is red, um, but my go-to sort of alt play right now, Tau BitTensor, that's crushing it on the day, and it's been pretty much just you know decoupled from like everything that's been going on. I mean, this is Tau against Bitcoin, and today it's just like, yeah, what? Like, see ya. And then even USD value, it's just been poking new highs and on a gradual, nice, steady uptrend, riding along the 10-day moving average. While everything else has been just very sideways, very boring. BitTensor's been crushing it. So yeah, yeah, I'm good. I'm glad I got that. Outside of that, not a lot going on. I'll just kind of go through some of these alts. I know some people were talking about Solana. Solana has lost its support now that it had in this channel, and it's got a big, ugly four-spot divergence flag on the weekly, which is ugly. And so, kind of what I'm looking at here is it looked like maybe it was going to reverse, certainly on the weekly against Bitcoin, but now it looks like it's probably just going to keep trending down, at least for the time being, unless it can get support off the center of these bands and bounce back up. But right now, it doesn't look good, especially looking at it on the dollar side, losing this support level. It really just kind of is a false breakout to a degree, back up into this range. And now it looks ugly, and now it's back down. So we'll see. I'm not going to look at it on the daily, but yeah, it's not looking good for Solana. Not that I'm down on Solana in the long term, but just in terms of right now, I still come back to the idea that it's a little bit too early to be jumping into alts. So this is another further indication of that. And like I said in previous videos, don't get swayed this early in the cycle on a 2 or 3 good week pump, from an alt, because a lot of them can do that and then just fizzle back out and dump back down. And if you buy this at the top thinking it's gonna keep going like it's the late stage bull run, frothy, crazy alt season, that's not usually how it works. You got to kind of stick more to fundamental technical analysis this early in the cycle, particularly with alts, because once they get overextended like this, they tend to mean revert back to the middle and come back down and retrace a lot of those same gains. So um, yeah, what else? What's Bitcoin Cash doing? Same kind of thing. A lot of the stuff is just having ugly weeks to start. I won't really dig into too much of them, but a lot of them are just. I mean, as we can see on the watch list, things look ugly. I did want to look at the Dixie real quick. Dixie makes sense. Makes sense to see this pumping. It's kind of runs in the inverse of Bitcoin. I do think though that actually on the weekly we're still in a confirmed downtrend. And this is just going to kind of keep playing out. And so, not at all surprised to see a bit of a bounce here. I wouldn't be surprised to see it even come back up to this line, which happens to coincide perfectly with the mean reversion here, the center of the Bollinger Bands on the weekly, the 20-week moving average. So likely get a bounce here, but ultimately the structure is pretty bearish. I mean, high, lower high, low, lower high, lower low, lower high, lower low. Um, it's just, yeah, this is textbook bear trend for the Dex or the Dixie rather. But in the moment, it's going to pump up, which is going to kind of affect what we're seeing with Bitcoin and everything else. I wouldn't be surprised if stocks, what do stocks do? Well, they look interesting. Um, Nasdaq's starting out the week red. Well, they're pretty much flat. They're relatively flat on the day. This one is interesting too with this liquidity indicator on the Nasdaq. Definitely a major divergence here, kind of similar to what you saw with Bitcoin, although even a greater sort of divergence here. I feel like the Nasdaq has really pumped up quite a bit while Bitcoin has pretty much just gone sideways, and meanwhile liquidity is just tanking. um, Something's going to have to give here for sure. I don't know, and I don't know what. I mean, obviously, if the banks, if the money's not there, then this is going to be short lived. So I don't know if maybe we see it come back up and do another tap at its all time high here, if it even gets to that point. It is kind of broken out from a resistance level here, so I don't know. Next stop is all-time high, kind of more or less, at least on the weekly time frame, but it's got a little while to get there, and I don't think it's going to do that, that quick. So I don't know. If the liquidity keeps going down like it does, I think we're going to see this kind of fizzle out a bit. But um, that's interesting there. Um, yeah, already we got a bounce off this line. I'm not going to read into that too much at the moment, but price action is ugly on Bitcoin for sure. And I think really kind of the name of the game here is just to kind of stay patient. Don't expect much. Look for dips to kind of buy. But I keep saying that in terms of my narrative, it's all going to be about this ETF approval, and what happens between here and here is just not going to be much. But if we do get a major dip, I think that's going to be a good buying opportunity. Um, and of course, even if like it gets rejected here, which it very well could, it could just create a better buying opportunity, So, um, but we'll see. We'll see if it holds this trend line. We'll see how the week plays out. We'll see if any of this starts to reverse. We'll see if liquidity starts to kick back up. Those will be what I'm looking for. I don't know. I guess, yeah, like I said, kind of a short show this week. I do want to kind of touch on a couple things on Wednesday. I'm going to have my friend James back on, and we're going to kind of dig more into some of the basics of TradingView setup. I wanted to kind of dig into a lot of these different tools that they have over here in these toolbars, and markup indicators and various, overlays that you can put on your charts to kind of spiff things up and glean insight and measurements and things like that. So that's what we're going to cover on Wednesday. And then on Friday, I'll probably do another TA show. And then also on Friday, if you are a Real Vision Pro Crypto member, I'm going to be appearing on the Real Vision Distillery, the monthly distillery show that they do with Ash and Nico and another Pro Crypto member. So that's going to be fun. If you're not a Pro Crypto member, I highly encourage you to consider it. It's like one of the best things that I've done. It's totally changed my life in in a number of ways, and made me a far better investor in macro and in crypto. But yeah. So anyway, I think that's going to be it for today. Again, kind of a short show. So yeah, if you were watching, thank you. I appreciate it. And I'll catch up with you guys on Wednesday. All right. Thanks, everybody.